Here's something uncomfortable to sit with. Your body doesn't trust you. Not really. Deep beneath your skin, past muscle and membrane, sits a deposit of fat so strategically protected that your own biology treats it like a state secret. It wraps around your liver, your intestines, your heart. It has its own blood supply, its own nerve connections, its own agenda. Scientists call it visceral fat. We're going to call it what it really is: a biological vault buried inside you, locked from the inside, and evolution holds the only key. But why does it exist? Why would your body hide energy reserves so aggressively? Because for almost all of human history, starvation was not a metaphor. It was Tuesday. Your ancestors lived in a world where food was scarce, winters were brutal, and the difference between surviving and not surviving was whether your body had enough reserve fuel to keep your brain running for one more day. Visceral fat, deep and protected, was that reserve. It wasn't a flaw. It was the masterpiece of a survival machine refined over millions of years. The problem is that the machine is still running. In you. Right now. In a world of abundance, your body is still behaving like scarcity is around the corner. It's still locking the vault, still guarding the reserves, still treating that deep, dangerous fat like its precious cargo, rather than the metabolically hostile, inflammation-generating, cortisol-spiking biological troublemaker that modern science now knows it to be. Visceral fat isn't passive. It's an active organ. It secretes hormones. It triggers inflammatory signals. It disrupts insulin sensitivity. In a very real sense, it's not just sitting there. It's running a quiet campaign against your long-term health from inside your own body. So the question isn't just how do you lose it? The question is, how do you convince a 4-million-year-old survival system to open the vault? It's surprisingly simple, yet incredibly complex. And the answer, strangely enough, is walking. To understand why walking works, you need to understand how your body decides what to burn in the first place. Because here's the thing, your body doesn't have one fuel system. It has 3, and they operate in a strict hierarchy, a kind of biological pecking order that determines which energy source gets tapped and when. Zoom in, past skin, past fat, past the capillary walls, down into a single muscle cell. What you're seeing is the energy economy of the human body in miniature. The moment you start moving, your body reaches for the fastest fuel available, ATP already stored directly in the muscle. This is the phosphagen system, pure, instant energy. It's powerful. It's also gone in about 10 seconds. Think of it as pocket change, useful for a sprint, useless for anything longer. When the pocket change runs out, your body pivots. It lights what you might picture as the sugar-burning fires. Rapid glycolysis, pulling glucose from your blood and glycogen from your muscles to generate ATP fast. This system is brilliant under pressure. It can scale up quickly, sustain moderate to high-intensity effort, and keep you moving through the discomfort of a hard workout. But here's the catch. The sugar-burning fires come with a cost. They generate metabolic byproducts. They spike cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone. And cortisol, in the context of visceral fat, is essentially the alarm system for the vault. High cortisol tells your body that something threatening is happening, that resources are under siege, that now is absolutely not the time to open the fat reserves. In fact, cortisol actively promotes fat storage in visceral deposits as a stress response mechanism. So the harder you push, the louder the alarm rings, and the tighter the vault locks. This is the cortisol paradox. Push too hard and you're actually working against yourself at the hormone level. But go back into that muscle cell. Because if instead of sprinting, you start walking, something different happens. The slower, steadier demand for energy gives your mitochondria, the actual fat-burning furnaces inside each cell, time to come online. Unlike glycolysis, fat oxidation is not a fast process. It requires oxygen. It requires time. It requires a specific metabolic environment to function. What you're watching, when it kicks in, is the slow-burn fat furnace, a quieter, more sustained energy reaction that pulls fatty acids directly from your fat stores and converts them into usable fuel. The exact moment this shift happens is called the metabolic crossover. It's the literal point at which fat oxidation overtakes carbohydrate burning as the primary fuel source. And it doesn't happen at the beginning of your walk. It doesn't happen in the first 5 minutes, or even necessarily the first 10. It happens when your body receives a sustained, consistent signal that this effort is safe, manageable, and not a crisis. Walking sends that signal. It tells your stress systems, stand down. It lowers cortisol. It keeps adrenaline quiet. And in that biological safety, the vault door begins, slowly, reluctantly, to open. So now you know the vault can open, but how do you make sure you're actually standing in the right place when it does? This is where the 50 to 70% rule becomes your most important tool. Your heart rate during exercise is a remarkably reliable proxy for which fuel system your body is using. When your heart rate climbs above roughly 70 to 75% of its maximum, glycolysis dominates. The sugar fires are roaring. Cortisol is rising. The alarm system is engaged. When you're below about 50%, the demand is so low that fat oxidation barely registers. You're burning fuel, but not meaningfully tapping visceral stores. The window, the steady-state metabolic window, lives between 50 and 70% of your maximum heart rate. In this zone, your body's working hard enough to need sustained fuel, but calm enough to access fat as that fuel. This is where the metabolic crossover lives. This is the zip code of the open vault. For most people, this corresponds to a brisk walk, not a stroll, not a jog. A purposeful, rhythmic, slightly elevated breathing walk that you can hold for 30, 40, 60 minutes without collapsing or spiking into panic mode. A pace where you could speak in sentences, but wouldn't want to recite a monologue. But here's where it gets genuinely remarkable. The 50 to 70% window isn't just about burning fat today. It's about rebuilding the infrastructure that burns fat tomorrow. Consistent walking at this intensity triggers mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria inside your muscle cells. Each session is a construction order. Build more furnaces, expand capacity. Over weeks and months, your muscles begin hosting what you might call a mitochondrial empire, a vastly expanded network of fat-burning infrastructure that makes every subsequent walk more efficient, more effective, and more capable of accessing those deep visceral stores. Posture and rhythm matter here more than most people realize. Walking with your spine tall, your core lightly engaged, and your arms swinging in opposition to your legs doesn't just look more intentional. It recruits more muscle groups, elevates your metabolic demand into that ideal window, and creates the kind of full-body rhythmic movement that synchronizes your cardiovascular and metabolic systems most efficiently. The empire grows, one walk at a time. Here's a thought worth sitting with at the end of all this science. You are, at this exact moment, the product of an unbroken chain of survivors. Every ancestor you have ever had lived long enough to reproduce. They walked. They walked enormous distances across grasslands and mountain passes, through cold and heat, not because someone told them it was healthy, but because movement was survival. Walking is the most ancient technology your body knows. And here you are, 4 million years later, carrying that same machinery. The same mitochondria, the same metabolic crossover threshold, the same biological vault, now filled not with hard-won reserves of a struggling hunter-gatherer, but with the quiet accumulation of a world that makes sitting very, very easy. The science is clear. When you walk at the right intensity, for long enough, consistently enough, your body stops treating its fat reserves as sacred. The cortisol stays low, the alarm stays quiet, the vault opens, and at the molecular level, something genuinely extraordinary happens. You change. More mitochondria, more fat-burning capacity, a body incrementally recalibrated toward health, one step at a time. In a nutshell, the exact moment walking starts burning visceral fat is not a single, dramatic event. It's a threshold, crossed quietly, somewhere in the middle of a sustained, steady walk, when your body finally decides that the world is safe enough to let go. And every time you go out and walk, you're making that argument again. Fortunately, the body is surprisingly good at listening.